correctly with the correct amount.
D20 Radio, where gamers roll.
www.d20radio.com.
Welcome to Me and Steve Talk RPGs, a podcast where me and my friend Steve try and help you get the most out of your role-playing game experience. Hey folks, what's up? Welcome back to Me and Steve Talk RPGs. I'm here tonight with Steve.
Hello.
Hello. And we're going to talk about some RPGs, but before we get into that, I want to take a minute to tell you about another podcast here on the D20 Radio Network, and this week, that's going to be the We Fix Games podcast.
We Fix Games?
Yes. Well, so unlike most of the podcasts on the D20 Radio Network, this is actually a video game-oriented podcast. It's co-hosted by Laura and Jerica, and what they do is I read their description, lovingly tear apart video games to figure out what makes them work and what could make them better. They each bring their own respective things they like about games and, elements they enjoy. They'll break down the game mechanics, they'll break down characters, themes, and then kind of like talk about maybe how they would make the game differently if they got to do that.
Well, sounds really cool. I'll have to check it out. I've been needing some new podcasts, so
Yeah.
We Fix Games, correct?
Mm-hmm. We Fix Games, and they're on all the major platforms based on what I'm seeing, and there'll be a link in the show notes to like their homepage or whatever. Anyway, to a certain point, I don't know, there was a tie-in between this and the topic that you proposed for tonight, but I don't know how I got there, so I'm just going to let you tell us what you want to talk about.
Well, I was talking about the idea of so recently I saw some signs pop up in my neighborhood for a new comic book shop.
Okay.
And they were advertising that they had, various D&D things. So I go to check out the shop. Turns out they're by appointment only at the time being, which is fine. So I end up making a little bit of conversation with the owner. And the owner has some old school AD&D books in near mint condition. That's fine with me. I don't care about the condition. I want to collect them because I already have a starting collection of AD&D books. So it made me think, and it sort of got me in the headspace of playing older editions or older versions of games. So we've sort of talked about it maybe before, but I don't know. It's been a while since we talked about it, so why don't we talk about it again? We're both big fans of Cyberpunk 2020.
Mm-hmm.
And having played some Red, I definitely see strengths in both versions.
That's fair.
And I think I prefer 2020 over Red, but at the same time I can't be like, oh well, 2020 is better than Red. It's not. It's a different version. There are different strengths and different weaknesses.
Yes.
We don't talk about Dungeons and Dragons very often, or other than maybe around it. But for me, like Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, and I know you're a 2e person because that's a lot of what you played.
Yeah, I got into D&D in the years preceding TSR getting sold to the then Peter Atkinson-owned Wizards of the Coast. So to me, the AD&D, the second edition, the classic with the guy on the horse on the front of the PHB, to me that was D&D.
I really like AD&D as a game. I think it's really strong as a tabletop game. I've sort of, we've talked ad nauseum about, I think it's better for new players because it doesn't present, and it's weird, I feel like it doesn't present as many options, so it lets the players be more open-minded to things. And especially with the product that WotC currently is producing, or Hasbro, or however you want to say it. I think going to an older edition, whether it be, a lot of people love 3.5, a lot of people love AD&D, a lot of people love that like Pathfinder 3.75, And again, there's a lot of already established content for AD&D. So one of the things that I was going to pick up was going to be a copy of Ravenloft, um, the the pre-written supplement for AD&D.
Right.
And I mean, yeah, go ahead.
Well, no, I was going to say, I mean, let's get into a little bit. I think maybe, okay, we know that a lot of games, have older editions. I mean, we mentioned Cyberpunk, obviously D&D. We're now on the 5th edition. Call of Cthulhu's on the 7th edition.
Correct.
Um, you know, many games have had new editions over the years. Technically, Red is the
The
4th
third.
edition of Cyberpunk
Um,
because you have the
yeah, because you do
original
have the original 2013, and
2013,
then
2020, and then the black and green one that
yeah, the green one, which is I think called Cyberpunk. I don't remember.
I don't
It
remember
has
what
a
it's
name.
called, and
It's
they've kind of they still acknowledge it existed. They don't market it at all.
oh
Um,
no, there's a reason.
but I think maybe does the discussion start with why were new editions created? Star Wars. I mean, you've got WEG D20, you've got the 2nd edition of WEG, then you've got the 2 editions under Wizards, and now the Fantasy Flight.
With Star Wars in particular, I mean, that one seems like that was just a changing of the guard type thing. So obviously you have WEG and then a second edition of WEG, which is a lot of times a second edition is revised rules, updated mechanics. In video games, you would call it quality of life adjustments, right? So
Right.
like you're seeing things that are making playing the game easier, funner, better in general ways, or at least better to some, maybe not to others. And then, as that game gets sold from company to company, obviously each company that buys that's going to want to put out their own version of it. Everybody wants to put out a version of Star Wars. I'm sorry to tell you. It doesn't matter if you're Fantasy Flight Games, Edge Studios, it, I'm sure people like Brian Cologne, right?
Well, right, right. No, yeah. In a case of a licensed IP, obviously the license moving to a different company almost necessitates a new edition. Be it,
Oh
I
yeah,
mean,
it's
Lord of the
it's
Rings. I mean, you know,
yeah, it's all of those things.
I
And
think
but go ahead, go ahead.
it's important too, though, that in the case of, let's say, D&D, also probably Green Ronan's Adventure Game Engine, some of these these editions, yes, there's updated mechanics. They may be easier to play. They may be updated for any number of reasons. It could be perhaps there were ways they did mechanics that they now don't feel are socially appropriate ways of addressing certain issues, or
Right. I mean, content changes and, like you said, socially conscious changes to make things more appropriate as the times change and keeping a game basically alive in a lot of ways. Because that's another thing is that a game can come out and the community can be really excited about it and the players will be really excited about it and everybody plays it, and then you have to have some word of mouth to make sure that that game keeps going. And by publishing a new edition, you can go, hey, look, there's a new version of this thing that you like.
well, not only that, from
And you can
and
also,
this is
well, you could also go to new players and be like, hey, look, there's a new thing that is a thing that people were already playing.
Yeah, and so and this is the elephant in the room too is, let's be honest, the publishers, whatever, this is a business, and this has been talked about openly by some people, including Ryan Dancy, comes to mind heavily with when the, again, like I said, the then Peter Atkinson owned Wizards of the Coast bought out the bankrupt TSR. They needed to make a return on their investment.
Correct.
3.5, the 3.0 actually, was not so much oh my God, we need to make these mechanics better. Okay, getting rid of Thaco, I'm good with that. It wasn't a tremendous problem for me, but it's much easier to understand the armor class system in
It,
post
it,
3,
yeah, I was going to say it is a barrier for entry in a lot of ways, but
but it's also just the business, right?
correct.
If your established players already have all the core books. So now you're only able to sell your core books to new players. Well, then how many do you make? You know, we've had conversations with various creators where the size of your print run drastically affects your cost per copy.
Correct. Well, and when you're talking about when you're not just talking about it, and especially in bigger games, you're talking about thousands, hundreds of millions of copies. You know what I mean? Like
Right.
you're talking big numbers when it comes to something like Dungeons and Dragons.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
and I'm not saying, plenty of small games you're talking big numbers when it comes to, 1,000 copies of a $70 book. It gets there, you know?
Right.
Um, but yeah, when you're talking about millions of copies and serving an entire like massive player base like Dungeons and Dragons is, and it's the elephant in the room. So yeah, and I agree with you there is that the conversation goes, well, how many reprints do we do of this edition? Versus why don't we just make a new version of this that has, let's say, updated or changed things. It's not necessarily even updating. So like let's take 3.5 to 4E. 3.5 was a pretty standard uh pretty standard by the book role-playing game by all accounts. And fourth edition is a miniatures war game disguised as a role-playing game.
Well, miniatures war game slash tabletop MMO.
Correct.
Right. And look, everyone who knows me knows I'm not a big fan of fourth edition D&D. That being said, and I think I've had conversations with people, and I think I've heard other people say this. I think had that game been released under another name, it might have gotten more respect, gotten more of the respect it probably deserves, because I think there were elements of it that were very, very good.
Final Fantasy, the video game franchise, released a series of games that sort of harkened back to older games, but they called them Tactics. They called them Final Fantasy Tactics.
I love that game.
And so I think if we would have released Dungeons and Dragons Tactics instead of Dungeons and Dragons 4th edition, people might have understood and been like, "Oh, well this isn't like it's an addition, but it's a different thing entirely."
Okay.
Um
Yeah.
but yeah, I get where you're coming from, where you're like, yeah. And there's people that really love 4th edition, and I give them a lot of credit.
Hey,
It
if it's what you like and it works for you, good.
was my introduction into playing in public. Um, that was the first time I'd ever played with what I'd call strangers.
Mhm.
And it was a good time when I played it. But yeah, it's you know,
Well,
it
let
is.
me
It
ask,
is.
I think going to more what you intended for this conversation though was so why would you choose to play an older edition?
Yeah, and that's sort of the question, isn't it? Um, in a lot of ways, it's like, well, and it's going to be very personal. But for me, a lot of times it's either familiarity with a system, preference for a mechanic style, or a gameplay style. Because let's be perfectly honest, fifth edition is a really fun game, but it's very after you've played enough of it, it gets very samey. And changing that up while also keeping it familiar to your players is something that is really beneficial in my opinion. And it keeps player engagement while also avoiding, like, I don't know, for me, GM fatigue, because it's like, oh, I get so tired of running these same combats that go the same way every single week. And if I were to sit down with my group and go, "Hey, I want to run some old school AD&D stuff," they'd be like, "Oh yeah, absolutely." And it gives me an excuse to be like, "Okay, and we get to do a little bit different things in combat, and I get to reimagine how this, works." Or like in the case of Cyberpunk, I think Red is great, but it's not as it straight up, in my opinion, is not as deadly as 2020.
No.
Meaning that character death doesn't happen as fast. It can get there. You can definitely make it be very deadly, but if you have to make it be deadly, it's not what 2020 was, because 2020 you didn't have to work to be deadly. Any any thug with a gun could have capped anybody and been like, "Oh, well, that was my character."
Well, and the armor ablation rules really, really affect the deadliness of that game.
Oh yeah. Oh
You
yeah.
know, and that's where in that game, I think more less powerful enemies where in a lot of games, oh, it's 3, minions, it's 5 minions, it's 7 minions, eh, isn't as big of a thing. In 2020, that really could change things a lot. Going from 2, you know, cyber guard dogs to 3 cyber guard dogs is a big change because of the number of attacks, people's armor getting run down, then they
Right.
get hurt worse, etc. And you know, and I think though, like you said, I think it's a combination of things. Some of it is 100% a nostalgia of this is the game I remember. You know what I mean? This is the attitude that I remember, and I think that's you know the rules in a lot of cases, and obviously everyone knows I'm kind of the opinion that the rules are kind of one of the less important parts of the game in a lot of ways, but at the same point, they also really should help establish a feel. And I think, in the case of Cyberpunk, like we're talking about, the feel of 2020 and Red is not the same.
Not at all.
There are elements of Red that I feel are much, much better than 2020, specifically the way they reworked the way a lot of the roles or classes worked. But overall, it doesn't it doesn't feel the same as 2020.
Yeah, it doesn't. It doesn't have the same I hate to say it doesn't have the same grit, but it really doesn't. It doesn't feel like it has the same it's a different kind of punk. It's a very different kind of punk. And time changes things and life,
Well,
punk
yeah.
in the 80s is very different than what we consider a modern punk.
Well,
Um,
but also, you know, we're looking at this we're looking at this through the lens of people who were there the first time or shortly thereafter. Yes, I'm older
right.
than you, but you know what I'm saying. Like, I, we have that nostalgia or that memory, and someone new doesn't
Oh,
necessarily.
yeah, absolutely. I completely understand where that's coming from and agree with you that someone might not, someone younger than me probably isn't gonna get like I'm not saying that to be like, oh, well, the younger generation. No, I'm saying that to be like statistically you probably don't have the frame of reference. Like I don't even really have a first-hand frame of reference for it, but I'm a big enough nerd that like I don't know. I it's funny, I talk to the people I work with, and they're all like, "What? How are you only 32, but you know things of like old sitcoms and old TV shows and like old music and old movies?" And I'm like, "Cause I'm a weird old soul. Like I don't know what to tell you. Like I don't know how to tell you this, but I somehow lived another life in like 1972 at one point. Like I don't know.
Yeah, well, but I mean, it's like, yeah, I don't know, but I think going back, but look at the OSR movement, which is essentially going back to play the older editions. In most cases, most of those rule systems are very much based in old editions of games,
Oh yeah.
and
Oh
maybe
yeah.
in some cases they're editions that through changes in publishing, licensing, whatever, are just gone, other than in people's collections. And look, we all know the internet is a vast place, and there are things hidden wherever. You can find
Everything
scans
and
of a
anything.
lot of old dead editions of games in PDF format if you look hard enough.
Correct.
Um,
But at the same time, if you want to support legitimate games, the OSR movement is an option. And I completely agree with you on that. OSR is very much the answer to like what I'm saying of, oh, well, I really liked AD&D. Well, congratulations. There's tons of games that play just like Advanced Dungeons and Dragons.
mhm. But then, okay, also, let's just say, like in my case, there potentially at some point I might, I've thought of, boy, I'd love to go back to the Dark Sun setting. And I believe there was a Dark Sun released for fourth edition. I don't think it ever got that much. I don't think that setting will ever see daylight again because
It is,
it was a problematic world in
yeah,
a
I
lot
was
of
going to say, it
ways.
is problematic in a lot of ways. So,
I don't think it was, and again, this is going on memory and nostalgia. I don't think it was problematic in the context that the quote unquote good guys were bad guys, but there were a lot of topics that were a significant part of the world that a large corporate company is not going to publish in this day and age. And I'm not saying that that's wrong, that they should publish it. I'm just saying
no,
I don't think
no,
it's going to happen.
I I think there would be some conversations happening if something like that were to happen. And I can't fault listen, it is problematic. There's issues with it. There's issues with the concepts in a lot of Dark Sun, but at the same time when it was written, it was a different you got to you don't have to, but you almost acknowledge that it was a very different time when Dark Sun originally came out, and some things we could get away with that's not kosher and not cool now.
Well, I think here's the thing. There are topics, uh, slavery and enslaved people is a significant thing in Dark Sun.
Correct.
I think on some level, simply avoiding taboo subjects is probably not a good thing for society. But
No, but
in
I
it,
don't know.
it at the same point,
It's too easy to make light of that particular subject and not give it the levity it deserves. And
I
to a mass consumer market, I think that's where you're running into that issue.
right, and also Dungeons and Dragons. Okay, look, we're sitting here. You're 30 something. I'm 40 something. Us playing a game is different than a bunch of 12 and 14-year-olds playing a game. And
Exactly.
I think to a certain point, maybe you and I and maybe a lot of our audience, we occasionally don't remember that, yeah, a 14-year-old playing with these topics is not necessarily maybe the best thing. They don't have the
No,
depth of
no.
understanding that, another 10, 15, 30 years of life brings or
Ask
can
ask
bring.
anyone who is around that age group a lot, particularly like teachers or educators in any way, and you'll realize that yeah, maybe we shouldn't give the kids a game about slave like they're gonna miss the point on this.
Right. Like
And
look,
they're gonna make
slavery is
light of a yeah. But it's one of those things where they're gonna make light of a serious thing, and they're gonna um and I'm not saying all of them. I'm not saying everyone's bad, but I'm saying that for the most part, I think the what you would refer to as the mass market consumer is going to cause issues in playing that particular game. Whereas
right.
someone who is not your mass market consumer, someone like you, where you want to play it for not just nostalgia's sake, but you have, good feelings about the setting itself, you're gonna give it the levity and respect that it deserves, and not make light of it. You know what I mean?
Right. Well, look, like in our Exalted campaign that we're playing and recording and
Recording, yeah.
broadcasting, you know,
It's that exact thing.
it hasn't, I don't think, really come up yet in the broadcasted episodes, but
No, but it's definitely come up in our play episodes.
slavery and enslaved people are an element in that setting and what's going on in the story, but it's not the focus, and it's not in any way, like the way we're handling it, we're approaching it as adults, and
Correct.
yeah, I don't want to spoil anything, but yeah, it is a topic that is,
Given all the weight and all of the respect that it deserves as well.
yeah,
And I want to say that for clarity's sake. I don't want anybody thinking that, oh, we're just using it as a narrative device. No, it's not. It's not just a narrative
no,
device.
it.
But yeah, and again, that's one of those things where you could never, you can't. I just, it's just not going to port well over to a newer edition. First off, I just don't think it does.
It's not even that it couldn't port well mechanically. It's just, I don't think, both from a for their position in the market, it's not what they should be putting out.
No,
It's not
no.
what Wizards should put out. And so, as much as, if you want to say it, I would like to see it, I I don't think that they can. Like,
Yeah, I
there's
completely agree
too
with
many
you.
potential problems for them to do it. And hey, guess what? We live in a world where, if I want that stuff, I can go to, be it, we'll say, Noble Knight, and put it on a wish list, or whatever it is, right? You can find that stuff if you want. Yes, some of it's going to be hard to find if you actually want, original, printed media, etc. But you can get the information easy enough. And I don't, I don't want to say I'm not a collector, because look, with the stacks of books that I have, it'd be foolish to try and say I'm anything but at the same point, I don't collect from the standpoint of, oh, I want a collection. I want the information and the reference and the inspiration. So, that's more available. Let's put it that way.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Well, I told somebody today, I was like, I can't collect things that I don't want to use in some sort of way. I don't like things to just sit on a shelf. I don't. I'm not I like to collect things that, no, I mean, not saying that I don't have a stack of books that just sit on a shelf, but if I ever look at that stack of books and go, "Man, I need to let me open that up and see what," like, I'm going to open it and not be afraid to be like, "What's in here?"
Yeah,
Like,
you're not a glass case collector.
no. No. And I'm not faulting anyone who is, but for me that's not something I want to be able to, like, if I want to crack open my books and read them and play with them and smell the pages and, whatever, I want to be able to do it. Like, I
Yeah.
it's mine at this point. I'm going to do what I want with it. And I think there's a lot of the collecting community that has sort of come to that conclusion as well, because I know a lot of people that collect figurines and stuff, and it used to be, oh, is it in box, is it still in the box, do you still have the box? And now people are like, no, I take it out of the box, I put it on my shelf, I play with it, I you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, that's a weird, but it's like, you talk about the value of a collectible. Well, that value is only a factor if you decide to sell it. You
yeah,
know, if
exactly, it's
if I have a
priceless to, yeah.
if I have a book that, if I were to sell it to someone, is worth $150,
Hmm.
but I don't want to sell it. Well,
Then it's priceless.
it's priceless, or it's worth the same as the chair I'm sitting in.
Well,
You know what I
yeah,
mean?
exactly.
Like,
I think then that, if you don't want to sell something, that automatically makes that thing not have a price for sale and thus priceless to you. That is a thing that is, you're not getting rid of that, and that's the end of that discussion. Like,
yeah, but
I don't know.
you know,
Yeah.
I think like you're talking about, the playing older editions, though. I think some of it could be, I think there's a lot of it is just there is that nostalgia element, even if it's not your own nostalgia. Does that make sense?
Correct.
Like
Yeah,
there's the
it's
good times that you know your older buddy told you about. You want to try and capture some of that. You know, look, the
no,
phrase "the good old days." I mean, that's exactly what it is.
yeah, exactly. No, I completely agree with that. And I think it's capturing a feeling. And and here's another thing, and I'll say this. I wasn't a big fan. I've come around on it. We finished Stranger Things.
Hmm.
That sort of got me in the mood for playing some AD&D because I've been watching them play it and be like, "Oh, I would like that edition." I
See,
really liked.
now I will say I one I very much enjoyed Stranger Things as an entire
Yes.
series.
Yeah.
People talk about that being a gaming show, and it's
It's
not.
not. It's not. No, the only thing that's got me wanting to play is just the little vignette bits at the end where they're sitting down and like finishing up a campaign. It's like, yeah, I remember those days. I remember that being fun. I remember AD&D. Like they don't even talk about like there's never any like the only thing they did was like summon a thing. They didn't cast any spells, they didn't do any combat. There was no dice actually like there was dice rolled, but there were no checks called out for. There were no like you know what I'm saying? It
Right, the
it wasn't
gameplay didn't appear on screen, but
correct.
the thing I think about it that struck me was that it was the lens that they used for the characters to explain what was happening.
Oh yeah, and that's sort of what I was explaining to my fiance is that because she was like, "Oh, well, is the mind flare a real thing?" And I was like, "Yeah, but it's not that." Like she's like,
Right,
"Is Vecna a real thing?" And I was like, "Yeah, but it's very much not that." And
right.
she was like, what about the Demogorgon?" And I'm like, "You're gonna hate this part."
But at the same point, you know,
It's a way for them to put a name on a thing.
right, and being kids that were doing that, it
Yeah, it makes
it
sense.
makes sense as to that's how they would interpret it.
I completely agree. I was originally upset that oh, I had the whole outrage. How could they possibly go through and call this a Demogorgon or this a mind flare? Now I get it. Now I understand. They weren't doing those things to be like this is the official. No, it's the in Stranger Things, the kids have no other frame of reference, so we're calling this a mind flare and this a Demogorgon and that's Vecna. Like,
Right, right, like, it was the names they were calling them, and it
yeah,
just
it was just their frame of reference for what they were going through, and that's cool. I think that show is on the whole, I think that show's pretty good.
oh, it was such a love letter to an era.
Oh yeah,
The whole series.
it really was, and I thought it was a pretty good series. I really did. I felt it ended well. I know you guys didn't come here for my TV or film opinions, but you're here. It's my podcast, so
Yeah, we could talk about that. I felt like the ending okay, in my head canon, could things have gone differently in the ending? Certainly. The one thing I will say, though, is I don't think they didn't leave anything where I'm going, "But what about?"
yeah, they definitely tied up their loose ends. I give them a lot of credit for that. I heard a lot of people on the internet that were saying, "Oh, it's the worst ending ever. Oh, it's terrible. Oh, it's awful." And I really don't. I didn't walk away with that feeling. I didn't walk away going, "This is bad." Like I walked away going, It's a solid like. This is how things should kind of come to like a thing like this should come to a nice, happy little conclusion. It we don't need doom and gloom. I don't need like not everything has to be super serious. I'm glad that this ended with a sort of happy ending.
Well, it didn't. Here's what I
Yeah.
like about it, and they kind of hinted at this the way they did end it, so as to not really spoil anything here. I like the fact that they ended it in a manner in which You can have your headcanon of how it ended. I can have mine,
Right. Exactly.
and and
Exactly.
we
Yeah,
can't.
there's no there is a loose end, but the loose end is in such a way that um it allows for you to have your opinion about what happened, and it allows for me to have my opinion about what happened, and both of those things are true because they showed us both of those options on screen.
Right. And look, the cynic of in me, if you will, goes, that's a brilliant marketing move because now you're generating people talking about it to have more people go back and watch it.
Right. Well, it
Because
is, and it's
we're
the
going to
truth.
discuss and debate between, well, I thought they should have this and that, or I think it means this and blah, 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 blah.
Yeah, I can understand that. I think I have a very literal opinion of what I think we were presented with what the characters know, and that's all we can know. And that's sometimes that's just the way it is. The
Oh,
characters
no.
saw what happened, and we didn't get any external, it's not like we got a view that is contradictory to what the characters saw.
Yeah, no, and yeah, exactly. And I think that's
So,
like, isn't that though kind of? I think that's the core of the tabletop gaming hobby, tabletop role playing hobby is that's the story we're crafting essentially. Is even though both of us participated, you feel like it went this way, and I feel like it went that way,
yeah,
and
exactly. Absolutely.
maybe to a certain point, what some of us are going for in wanting to go back to an older edition is that a lot of older editions weren't as rigidly defined. And I know that's weird to say because I think if anything, like Cyberpunk 2020 is crunchier than Red, but I don't know. I, like I feel like in my head anyway, the old AD&D is less rigidly defined and to a point then makes it a better storytelling tool
Bingo.
because I don't have to work around as many big mechanical structures.
Well,
That being said,
there's one particular mechanical structure that is you know, it's the fact that they've spelled out. So in AD&D, they didn't spell out every single skill that you have. That's it. That's the biggest thing for me is that being able to be like, okay, well, you tell me what kind of check you make here instead of me going, give me a perception check.
well, okay.
Give me an X check, give me a Y check. And then the player looks at their character sheet and goes, "Well, I'm not good at that." Well, I didn't ask if you were good at it. I asked you to roll dice. Like,
But I think you're kind of hitting on it. And I think it's in the context that we're talking about where there maybe not as defined a rule structure. It's tell me what you're doing given who you're and as the GM you say to the player, tell me what you're doing. The player tells you. And then based on that character, how they describe it,
yeah, then you
etc., we
can be like,
figure out what kind of check we're making and how we're going to adjudicate it a
correct.
little bit more like the way that at least I like to play Genesis.
Yeah,
Tell me what you're
yeah,
doing, and then we figure out how to roll it.
correct. Yeah, and that's I've always liked that about AD&D is you tell me how we're doing this, not you look at your character sheet and go, I think I should roll an animal handling check.
Yeah. Well, the Jim Davies quote that I go back to all the time: "Play the world, not your character sheet."
Mm-hmm.
And I hate to say it because look, I own numerous, games where I may own books from more than one edition, or I own a newer edition or an older edition, etc. On some level, like you said, sometimes maybe they're cleaning up something that the designer wasn't happy with, or they're addressing something that they no longer like the way they handled it, or whatever. Um, and I guess to a certain point, when you're putting out a product that is a tool for other people to use, there is an amount of responsibility to do that in a certain way.
Right.
Um, I don't think though. Let me just say this. I don't think a newer edition of a game invalidates an older edition.
No, no, I don't think so either.
Um, in the same way that a cover of a song doesn't diminish my enjoyment of an older or a different version of that song.
Sure. Depends on the song.
Well, look, we all have, you know, different versions of songs that we may or may like better. Look, like, for
You can't.
example,
Johnny Cash is hurt.
oh, and look, that okay, there's a prime example, right? Trent Reznor has been quoted as saying, "That's now Johnny Cash's song."
Yeah, that's not my song anymore.
And he doesn't say that in meaning any disrespect. It's him going, "My God, he took what I did and just went so far beyond, and it's so good." And especially if you watch the video that Cash did for that. Oh my
Oh yeah.
God, is that
Oh,
impactful.
it makes me cry every time.
But like, okay, I'll go to another one. And I don't know if you'll remember this. Led Zeppelin song, Misty Mountain Hop.
Correct.
One of my favorite Zeppelin tracks.
Okay.
But in approximately 96 or 97, I want to say, there was a Led Zeppelin tribute album released where a bunch of different bands, including Tori Amos, Henry Rollins, etc., covered, I think Rollins was on this anyway, covered Zeppelin tunes.
Hmm.
And the Four Non-Blondes, which I
Oh
don't know if you
wow.
remember them, they did
Yeah.
a version of Misty Mountain Hop, and it is pretty much a straight cover, but wow, is it good.
Huh. I'm gonna have to look that up after this. I have to look that up because I like the Four Non Blondes.
Oh, it's really good. Um, you have, like you mentioned, Johnny Cash's Hurt. Yeah, I don't know. To me, it's kind of a similar thing. I mean, you have
Yeah.
it's a little bit odd, but have you ever heard Warren Zevon's version of Raspberry Beret?
Yes. Yep.
Um,
Or yeah, there's a lot of covers that just kill it. I mean, one of my favorite covers is um Man Who Sold the World. I love the Nirvana live unplugged version of that.
yes, that is very good.
I think
Um,
I like that version better than Bowie's version actually, but
so here's one, and this is actually from an album that was entirely covers. And you mentioned Bowie. Have you heard the Power Man 5000 version of Space Oddity?
I'm not a Power Man fan.
I kind of like them, but they have an album called Copies, Clones, and Replicants
Oh,
that
okay.
is all covers. That's
Oh,
on
okay.
there. Um, Devo, I think, is on there. Quiet
Oh, wow, cool.
Riot. Or no, Twisted Sister, not Quiet Riot. But yeah, it's an interesting album.
Well, that's like there's a just to keep talking about covers for a little bit. There's a version of they go by the Chicks now, but the Dixie Chicks. Um they did a song called Goodbye Earl. There was a ska punk band called Me First and the Gimme Gimmes.
Mm-hmm.
They covered that song. I think I love it. It's such a weird cover of that song.
Their whole bit is doing covers.
Well, yes, their whole bit is doing covers, but that particular version is like such a good pop punk version of that song
Mm-hmm.
that and it just hits just right. I don't know. I don't know how to
Remember
put
the
it.
Boss Tones version of Sweet Emotion or Enter
Oh my
Sandman?
god. Yeah. Ugh. But anyways, any final thoughts on this? Because I think we need to move into game of the week.
No, I mean, like, look, don't ignore an old edition. It could
No.
be what you need, what works for you.
Yeah. Don't be
Just because
afraid to
it's
check them out.
newer doesn't mean it's better or worse. It's just different. And yes, you may find things in a game that, oh my God, how could they publish that? Well, in the year that it was published, maybe that was an accepted norm. Doesn't make it right, but you as the person running/playing the game can still address it how you feel appropriate.
Hindsight's 2020.
Yes.
I say that a lot, but hindsight's 20/20, and that's just the fact.
And the
But
more you have of it, the more you realize that.
yeah. But anyways, with all that said, let's go ahead and move into game of the week.
Woohoo! Game of the week.
Game of the week. Game of the week.
So my game of the week, I remember you telling me a story about back in college you had a bad movie night.
Uh-huh.
Did you ever watch Plan 9 from Outer Space?
I thought you used this like 2
Oh,
episodes
did I?
ago.
Did I use the Plan 9 from Outer Space game? Never mind. Hold on. We got options. Go ahead and do yours.
Okay.
Go ahead and do
Yeah,
yours.
you did, yes. Back in early November.
Oh, oops. Oops.
All right.
That's
Not
a
that we've
first
never
one.
repeated, but that's a little close.
That is too close. No. I completely agree with you. I didn't realize that we I think you understand where I'm frustrated here
Oh,
because we do this.
it's it not that there aren't lots more games out there, but this does get increasingly harder to find stuff that you're going, "Oh, this is different and interesting and off the beaten path." But
Correct.
I found something that kind of hits on this edition retro vibe kind of thing. So let me throw you a link for this. Um, this is a title called Conspiracy X 2.0. And this is uh came out in '06. Um it's like a 250 some page PDF. It'll set you back about $10.50 currently. But it is very much kind of in this, that 90s, 2000s conspiracy. It says, the surface world looks very much like the one outside your bedroom window, the same people walking down the same streets, etc., and so on. But something just doesn't seem right. You just got that feeling that something isn't as it should be. Man, did that person just kind of appear out of nowhere or whatever? Um, so this is, you know, it feels like a conspiracy game, a
Yeah.
conspiracy X. But like, I feel like okay, I've talked about it a little bit. I watched Blacklist recently, the whole
Mhm.
series. This feels like it could, it doesn't say that it delves really into the supernatural, but that watch some of Bones and they touch on some of this, conspiracy type stuff,
Right.
especially with the one character, X-Files, but not necessarily taking it. You could even use this for like a Stranger Things, probably. I don't know how
Yeah.
well it's geared for kids, but okay, let me pitch this to you. I have a Stranger Things spin-off to pitch you.
Okay.
I want a modern day set Stranger Things esque thing, but where the adults are like, um, oh, dang it, why can't I ever remember his name? Dustin and Max.
Eddie? Oh, Max.
Well,
Okay.
Eddie can't really participate,
No, not
but
anymore.
more like a Dustin and Max are kind of like the narrators slash adults, kind of like coaching the kids through something, but they have that kind of Gen X attitude of like, uh, you seen like Dad Bod Veteran on Facebook Reels, and that, like, I don't know, to me, like a modern Stranger Things with them kind of narrating over the top with that very kind of jaded Gen X thing would be hysterical. Or am I
Yeah.
crazy?
No, I think that'd be fun. Um,
But anyway,
yeah.
yeah, Conspiracy X. Like I said, they have some supplements out for it for paranormal and extraterrestrial stuff. But yeah, it seems like it could be kind of fun. Not that you might not already have something you could do this with, but
Yeah. Definitely.
and it says it uses Unisystem, which I think is the Traveler engine, isn't it?
I think Unisystem's the Traveler engine. I don't know. Correct us if we're wrong. Um, so I don't really have a game, more so a book series.
Okay.
And it is game adjacent. I have been listening to the book series of Dungeon Crawler Carl. Have you heard about this at all?
No.
You would really enjoy Dungeon Crawler Carl.
Okay.
Um, it is about a guy. He is a guy and his cat. He's ex-military. but he was, uh, I want to say National Guard. No, it wasn't National Guard. Anyways, and basically, aliens have come to Earth. They have stripped the Earth for its minerals, and it's him and his cat and about 4 million other people at the beginning of the first book, or it's like 10 million other people at the beginning of the first book, as they go through this massive dungeon. And the whole goal of it is to come out the other side of the dungeon, and then you become the supreme leader of Earth. There are 8 floors, uh, and each floor gets a little bit harder. The whole thing is gamified. These aliens have like there's achievements and an announcer and all these silly goofy, like he gets loot boxes as the game goes on.
Oh, geez.
Um and it's him and his cat, who very early on, his cat named Princess Donut gets gets the ability to speak with him, and she is just as prissy and just as like uppity as any cat what you would imagine named Princess Donut. It is such a good fun, it's game adjacent. And it's just such a cool book series. And I just finished the first one. Excited to get into the second one. I really love it. I really highly recommend it. And if you're a gamer, you'll like it. If you play video games, you'll probably really enjoy it. But even as an RPG player, it's got all kinds of stuff, fun characters, fun character concepts. So they talk about like one of the early monsters that they fight is a llama that spits fire. And it's just such a fun, interesting. Oh, and then it's also got the twist of the whole thing is being televised to an alien audience. So it's kind of got that Slay Industries feel of, well, you better get some
Running
views.
Man.
Yeah, you better get some views so you can get better loot.
That sounds cool.
It is a lot of fun. I listened to the audiobook version on Spotify. It's included in premium. The only gripe I have with the audiobook version on Spotify is, for whatever reason, the book chapters, the end, and then it's like 10 minutes of silence, and then it starts the next chapter, which is super frustrating because I can't interact with my phone while I'm working. So I have to stand there, keep working through the like 10-ish minutes of silence while I'm waiting for the next chapter to pick up. But that's a different problem.
Yeah.
That's not the book's fault, I'll say.
I'll have to look that up.
Yeah, it's definitely worth a listen. Or, if you're in the mood for reading something, I'm sure it's really well written, but it's definitely worth a listen, in my opinion, because it is just, I find myself, chuckling while I'm at work just because of the silly situations they get themselves in. He's just a dude. He just doesn't want to deal with this. Like, he was thinking about stealing the cat and running away to begin with, and now he's stuck. Oh, did I mention the cat is like, she's like Walter's dog in The Big Lebowski. She has papers. She's a show cat. Like,
Jeez.
so it's hilarious. Highly recommend Dungeon Crawler Carl. It is it's not a book that I would recommend to kids, but maybe like teens, older teens, adults for sure. But yeah, it is a good time.
Cool.
Yeah, definitely Dungeon Crawler Carl. I've been, like I said, I started the first one, sort of heard people talking about it, and was like, this sounds really good, and started it and was like, this is really fun.
Hey, yeah, I'll have to look that up.
With all that being said, we want to remind everyone, Patreon. We do have a Patreon. It does support the show. That's how we pay for our hosting. Then also we have a this thing that we're talking through right now, Discord. We have a Discord. Please come join our Discord. I don't know why my brain just completely was like, what is this thing that we're on?
Yes, Discord. You can come find us, talk to us, ask questions, throw out your crazy ideas, and some of our crazy friends will join in and discuss them with us and all that fun stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, And as always, we want to remind everyone to be kind to one another and get out there and play some RPGs.
Yep. Take care, y'all.
Intro and outro music by the band 12 Noon. You can email us at meandsteverpg@gmail.com. You can find us on Twitter and RPGs. Find us on Facebook at Me and Steve RPG Podcast, on Discord at Me and Steve RPGs, and as always, all of these links are in the show notes. Thank you, and be kind to one another.
How much for the cigar?
Cigar, $20, dog. You gotta go down the street to the store and buy that.